Let me ask you a question. When you take study notes, do you do this? Do you highlight entire paragraphs in your textbook, rewrite your notes word for word, spend hours making your study notes look neat and aesthetic? Most students do, and it feels productive at the time. But when an exam day comes and suddenly it looks like your brain has wiped half the information you thought you knew. There's a reason for this. The way most people take notes isn't actually designed to help them learn and retain information. It's just a passive review, and passive reviews don't stick. There's a study technique that forces your brain to engage with information in a way that actually helps you remember it. It's called concept mapping. When done properly, it's one of the most powerful ways to organize information, make connections between ideas, and recall what you've learned when you need it most. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 6 steps to creating an effective concept map that actually helps you learn. I'll share some of the biggest lessons I've learned about how concept maps should be functional, not just visually appealing, and how they should evolve over time as your understanding grows. Let's get started. The first step to making a concept map that actually works is defining its purpose. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, it's easy to overload your map with too much information, get lost in unnecessary details, or create something that looks nice but doesn't actually help you learn. Before you start, ask yourself what this concept map is meant to do. Are you using it to summarize a subject for an exam? Do you need to break down a complex topic so it's easier to understand? Are you trying to organize research for an essay? Or are you mapping out connections between different topics? Each of these goals will change how you approach the map. If you're preparing for an exam, your concept map should focus on the big picture, making sure key ideas and their relationships are clear. If you're breaking down a difficult topic, you want to go deeper and include key steps, definitions, and explanations. If you're organizing research for an essay, your map should help structure your arguments, examples, and themes. To make this step practical, write down a 1-sentence purpose before you start. For example, you might say, I'm creating this concept map to summarize the nervous system for my biology exam. Or, this concept map will help me break down the key themes in Macbeth for my English essay. Having this purpose in mind will help guide what information you need to include and how you need to organize it. When you define why you're making a concept map, you actually engage with the material instead of just copying information onto a page. You stay focused on what actually matters instead of trying to cram in everything you've learned. Most importantly, you turn your concept map into a tool for thinking, not just another set of notes. Once you know why you're making your concept map, the next step is to decide on the core idea that everything else will connect to. This might seem obvious, but it's where a lot of students go wrong. Instead of sticking to a single main topic, they try to cram multiple ideas into one map, which makes it confusing and hard to use. A good concept map is built around a clear starting point. If you're studying biology, your central idea might be the nervous system. If you're analysing a novel, it could be themes in Macbeth. If you're preparing for a history essay, it might be the causes of World War I. No matter what subject you're studying, you need to pick one main idea and place it at the center of your page or screen. Think about the central idea at the anchor of your entire concept map. Everything else will branch out from it. If you don't define it properly, your map will lack direction and you'll end up with scattered information that might not connect in a meaningful way. A mistake many students make is choosing a topic that's too broad. For example, if you're studying psychology, putting psychology in the middle of your map won't be very useful. It's too general and you'll struggle to organize information effectively. Instead, narrow it down onto something more specific, like operant conditioning or stages of memory. At the same time, you don't want to make your central idea too specific. If it's too narrow, you won't have enough room to expand on key ideas. Instead of Pavlov's dog experiment, which is just one example of a broader concept, you might choose classical conditioning, so you can explore multiple aspects of this theory. Before moving on to the next step, take a moment to check that your central idea is focused but flexible enough to allow for meaningful connections. If it feels too broad or too narrow, adjust it now. Once you've locked in your main idea, you're ready to start building out the structure of your concept map by identifying key subtopics. This step is what separates a useful concept map from a messy web of unrelated facts. One of the biggest mistakes students make is dumping every piece of information they can think of onto the map without organizing it properly. When that happens, the map quickly becomes overwhelming and doesn't actually help with learning. To avoid this, you need to group related information into clear, logical categories. Start by asking yourself, what are the 3 to 5 biggest ideas that relate to my central topic? These should be broad enough to cover multiple ideas, but detailed enough to keep your map organized. If your central idea is the causes of World War I in modern history, your main subtopics might be militarism, alliances, imperialism, or nationalism. If you're mapping out factors for influencing health in Australia for PDHPE, your subtopics could include socio-cultural determinants, socio-economic factors, environmental influences, or government policies and initiatives. Each of these subtopics will act as branches that connect directly to the central idea. Once you've chosen them, you can start adding details underneath each one in the next steps. At this stage, resist the urge to include too many subtopics. If you have more than 5, your map might become too complicated and difficult to follow. If you feel like you have too many important ideas, try combining similar ones or making sure each subtopic is truly distinct. This step is crucial because it reduces cognitive overload by structuring information into manageable chunks. When your brain can see how key ideas fit together, it's much easier to understand and remember the material. Once you've identified and grouped your subtopics, you're ready to move on to the next step, which is creating connections between them and showing how ideas relate to one another, which is step 4. A common mistake students make is treating their concept map like a list, placing related topics near each other without making their relationships clear. The best way to do this is by using arrows, linking words, and visual hierarchy. Let's start with arrows. Arrows help you trace the flow of information and understand how one idea leads to another. Instead of just placing brain structure and types of neurons next to each other, an arrow might connect them with the phrase neurons and send signals to different parts of the brain to explain their relationship. If you're mapping out causes of World War I, arrows might connect alliances to escalation of conflict, showing how alliances between countries led to a larger war. A strong concept map also uses short linking phrases that describe how ideas connect. For example, in an economics concept map about the market structures, you might write, perfect competition leads to lower prices for consumers, and monopoly results in reduced consumer choice. Instead of just drawing an arrow between two ideas, these small phrases force you to think critically about how information fits together. Another way to improve your concept map is by arranging information in levels to show what's most important. The broadest concepts should be at the top, whilst more specific details should branch off below. For example, if your central topic is Macbeth, the major themes would be directly connected to the title, while specific examples like character actions or quotes would branch out underneath each theme. At this point, your concept map is starting to take shape. You've defined your main idea, identified key subtopics, and created meaningful connections between them. Now it's time to step back and trim the fat. One of the biggest misconceptions about concept mapping is that more information automatically makes it better. But a cluttered, overloaded map is just as ineffective as a messy set of notes. This goal isn't to fit everything into the page, it's to make sure that what's there is clear, structured, and actually useful for learning. A great concept map should be concise and easy to follow at a glance. If you have to spend too much time deciphering it, you've probably included unnecessary details or overcomplicated the structure. The best way to simplify your map without losing meaning is to go through it systematically and ask yourself a few key questions. Does every piece of information serve a purpose? If something doesn't actually support the main idea or its subtopics, consider removing it. Your concept map isn't meant to include every possible fact. You can always refer back to your notes for more detail. Am I using full sentences when I don't need to? Long phrases and full sentences take up unnecessary space. Replace them with short words or phrases that are easier to process at a glance. Are there any duplicate ideas? If you've written the same concept more than once in different places, consolidate it. The best concept maps minimize repetition and instead show how ideas interconnect. Is the structure clear and readable? If certain areas look messy or confusing, try reorganizing them. Adjust spacing, move key ideas so they flow logically, and ensure that the arrows and linking words are easy to follow. Once you've gone through with this process, your concept map should feel more polished and refined, not just visually, but in terms of clarity and usefulness. Keep in mind that the first version of your concept map will rarely be your final one. The best concept maps evolve over time. As you deepen your understanding of a topic, you might spot new connections, realize certain details aren't necessary, or find better ways to structure information. Now that you've fine-tuned your concept map, there's one final step: adding depth. A good place to start is by adding examples. When you add examples, you give abstract ideas something concrete to latch onto. This makes it easier to recall the information later, especially in an exam setting. For example, if your concept map is about the causes of the French Revolution in modern history, don't just write economic hardship as a topic. Go further by adding a small note explaining how heavy taxation on the Third Estate and food shortages created widespread unrest. This visual representation of this example will make the cause and effect relationship much clearer. If you're mapping out human rights and global perspectives in legal studies or society and culture, instead of just using United Nations as an organization that protects human rights, include a key international case where the UN played a role, such as an intervention in the Rwandan genocide or an establishment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Trying to establish abstract concepts to real-world case studies makes them easier to analyze and recall in essays. If you're working on an economics concept map about inflation, adding real-world applications can be even more powerful. Instead of just listing causes of inflation, you might want to add a branch connecting high government spending to historical examples like stimulus packages during economic recessions, helping you see how economic policies impact inflation rates in practice. The key here is to be selective about what examples and applications you include. You don't want to overload your concept map with too much extra information, so focus on the examples that will help you understand the concept better, make it easier to remember, and give you something useful to reference in an exam or essay. With this final step, your concept map is ready to use. But before we wrap up, let's go over some of the biggest lessons I've learned about concept mapping. Lesson number 1, concept maps should be functional, not just visually appealing. Don't spend too much time trying to make the maps look aesthetically perfect, using color coding, fancy fonts, and overcomplicated layouts. The real goal is to create a usable study tool, not an art project. Focus on clear connections and logical flow over decoration. Lesson 2. Your first draft will be messy, and that's a good thing. Your concept map doesn't have to be perfect from the start. The first version of your map is just a brain dump. You can reorganize and refine it later. The third lesson is that a bad concept map is just a collection of disconnected bubbles. A poor concept map looks like random information scattered across a page with no clear relationships. If your map doesn't show cause and effect relationships, comparisons, or hierarchy, then it's not helping you to think critically. Always ask, how do these ideas connect? And what is the big picture takeaway from this section? Lesson number 4, grouping related ideas together is one of the most powerful study techniques. The human brain remembers information best when it's chunked into meaningful categories. Instead of listing ideas randomly, always ask, which pieces of information will belong together? What bigger category do they fit under? And if your map feels cluttered, you're likely to need to group ideas better. And last but not least, lesson 5. Your concept map should evolve over time. Your concept map is not a one and done study tool. It should evolve as you study. As you learn more, revisit your map to add new insights or explanations, refine and clarify complex sections, and cross-check with practice questions to see if you're missing key ideas. Now that you know how to create effective concept maps, try using them in your studies and see the difference for yourself. And if you're not sure where to start or you want a shortcut, Excel HSC Copilot has ready-made concept maps that you can use, expand on, and customize to fit your learning style. I've left the sign-up link in the description box below. Well done, guys, and I'll see you next time.